My name is Sadie and I was in Kyoto, standing in the middle of a 400-year-old garden when my phone vibrated. I was there for work, restoring a wooden temple that had survived centuries of war and weather. It was peaceful. The air smelled like rain and cedar. I pulled out my phone expecting an update from my project manager. Instead, I saw a text from my younger sister, Nora. Sold the timber estate for $8.5 million. Finally cash rich. Thanks for being away so I could handle it. I stared at the screen. The timber estate wasn't just land. It was my grandfather's legacy, a historic lodge and acres of protected forest that I had promised him I would preserve. And Nora had sold it. While I was halfway across the world. The audacity wasn't just in the sale itself. It was in that final sentence. Thanks for being away so I could handle it. She wasn't apologizing. She was celebrating my absence as a tactical advantage. She had waited until I was out of the country to dismantle our family's history for a payout. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took a screenshot. Before I tell you what I did next, I want to know, where are you listening from right now and what time is it for you? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far this community reaches. I didn't reply to Nora. I didn't call my parents. I walked out of the garden, went back to my hotel and packed my drafting tools. Every movement was precise. I folded my clothes. I secured my laptop. I checked out of the hotel and booked the next flight home. It was a one-way ticket. On the plane, while everyone else was sleeping or watching movies, I opened my laptop and connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. I pulled up my cloud storage where I kept digital copies of every important document regarding the estate. The original deed, the land survey, the zoning restrictions. I reviewed them all. I wasn't looking at them as a granddaughter mourning a loss. I was looking at them as an architect inspecting a structural failure. I zoomed in on the property lines. I checked the dates. I formulated a plan. This wasn't a family tragedy. This was unauthorized demolition. And you don't cry about unauthorized demolition. You stop it. I landed 18 hours later, exhausted but wired on adrenaline. I didn't go to my apartment. I rented a car and drove straight to the mountains. The drive usually took 3 hours. I made it in 2.5. As I turned onto the private road leading to the lodge, my stomach tightened. The air should have smelled like pine and damp earth. Instead, it smelled like diesel. I rounded the final bend and slammed on the brakes. The driveway was jammed with heavy machinery. Excavators. Bulldozers. Trucks loaded with equipment. They weren't there to renovate. They were there to clear. I got out of the car, my boots crunching on the gravel. A man in a hard hat walked toward me holding a clipboard. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his tone dismissive. I didn't back down. I walked right up to him. "Who authorized this machinery?" I asked. He blinked, surprised by my tone. "The new owners. We're prepping for site clearance." I pulled a roll of blueprints from my bag. "Not today, you're not. I'm a structural engineer and architect. And I know for a fact that the load-bearing capacity of this access road is rated for residential vehicles only. You bring those excavators any closer to the lodge foundation and you risk a catastrophic collapse." He hesitated. He looked at the blueprints, then back at the heavy machines idling on the soft ground. "I don't have a stop work order," he said, but he sounded uncertain. "You will, I promised. But right now you have a liability issue. If that foundation cracks while your machines are unauthorized, your insurance won't cover it. Do you want to take that risk?" He signaled the crew to cut the engines. Silence fell over the property. It was heavy and tense. I walked past him, up the steps to the main lodge. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open. Inside, the great room was exactly as I remembered it. The massive stone fireplace. The rough-hewn beams. The smell of wood smoke and old leather. But the atmosphere was wrong. Nora was sitting on the leather sofa, a bottle of expensive champagne open on the coffee table. My parents were there too, sitting in armchairs looking at the floor. When Nora saw me, she didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. "You're back early," she said, taking a sip of her drink. "I thought you were in Japan for another month." I walked over to the table and picked up the champagne bottle. I read the label. $200. Bought with the deposit, I assumed. "You sold the estate, Nora." "Without telling me." He shrugged. "I saved us, Sadie. You were off playing in your gardens, ignoring the reality. This place is a money pit. The taxes, the maintenance. It was drowning us. So I made an executive decision. $8.5 million. Do you know what we can do with that? We're set for life." I looked at my parents. They still hadn't made eye contact. "And that. Did you agree to this?" My father shifted in his chair. "Sadie," he mumbled. "It's a lot of money. We can finally retire comfortably. No more worrying about the roof leaking or the boiler breaking. Nora handled it. Nora handled it." The phrase echoed in my head. I looked at them, really looked at them. My parents weren't victims here. They weren't tricked elderly people confused by technology. They were silent partners. They had watched Nora sell our heritage, my grandfather's legacy, and they had said nothing because the price was right. They were trading their integrity for a quiet, funded retirement. And that silence hurt more than Nora's noise. It was a transaction. They had sold me out for comfort. And Nora, she was just the broker. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. You didn't save this family, Nora, I said. You liquidated it. And you, I said to my parents, you let her. Because it was easier than being responsible. Nora stood up, her face flushing. You're just jealous because I did something. I'm the one who took charge. I'm the one who secured our future. You're just the absent sister who thinks she's better than everyone else because she has a degree. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just nodded. Enjoy the champagne, Nora, I said. It might be the last thing you enjoy for a while. I turned and walked out. I didn't go to my car. I walked down the driveway past the silent excavators and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Juliet, I need a lawyer. And I need one now. I drove straight to the city to a glass office building downtown. Juliet met me in the lobby. We had been friends since architecture school, but she had pivoted to law. She was sharp, ruthless, and exactly who I needed. We went up to her office and I laid everything out. The text, the machinery, the family ambush. Juliet listened, taking notes on a legal pad. So she sold it, Juliet said. But how? Your grandfather left the estate to both of you 50-50. She can't sell without your signature. She said she handled it, I said. She said I was away so she took care of it. Juliet frowned. That implies she signed for you. Did you ever give her power of attorney? Never. I wouldn't trust Nora with my houseplants, let alone my legal standing. Juliet spun her chair to her computer. Then we need to see the paperwork. If there's a deed transfer, it's public record. He started typing. I watched her screen. My heart was pounding but my mind was cold. I was back in architect mode. Analyzing the structure of the sale. Looking for the stress points. Here it is, Juliet said. Recorded 3 days ago. Sale price $8.5 million. Buyer Summit Luxury Resorts. Seller the estate of Arthur Reed. Signatories Nora Reed and Sadie Reed. She turned the screen toward me. Is that your signature? I leaned in. It looked like my signature. It had the same loop on the S, the same sharp angle on the D. But I hadn't signed it. I was in Kyoto 3 days ago. That's a forgery, I said. Juliet nodded. But look at this. She pointed to a supplementary document. A power of attorney. Dated 2 weeks ago. Notarized. Giving Nora full authority to act on your behalf regarding the estate. I stared at the document. 2 weeks ago. I was already in Japan. I couldn't have signed this in front of a notary in this state. It was physically impossible. But there was. My name. A notary stamp. And a witness signature. I looked closer at the witness signature. It was messy, a scrawl I didn't immediately recognize. But the name printed below it made the blood drain from my face. Silas Thorne. Silas. My ex-boyfriend. A real estate agent. The man I had broken up with 6 months ago because he was too ambitious, too willing to cut corners. He was the listing agent. Of course he was. He knew my schedule. He knew exactly when I would be out of the country. He knew I was in a remote area with spotty service for the first week of my trip. He didn't just facilitate the sale. He engineered the timing. He used his intimate knowledge of my life to help my sister rob me. The betrayal was total. Sister. Parents. Slover. It was a conspiracy of the people who were supposed to care about me most. Juliet looked at me. You know him? He's my ex, I said, my voice flat. And he's the listing agent. Juliet sat back. So we have a forged deed. A forged power of attorney. And a conflict of interest that you could see from space. This isn't just a civil dispute, Sadie. This is fraud. Criminal fraud. Do you want to go there? I looked out the window at the city skyline. I thought about the excavator sitting on my grandfather's land. I thought about Nora drinking champagne. I thought about my parents' silence. Yes, I said. I want to burn it down. Juliet started making calls. She hired a private investigator to pull the notary's records. She requested the full transaction history from the title company. We spent the next 2 days building a case. We didn't just want to stop the sale. We wanted to invalidate it so thoroughly that no developer would ever touch that land again. And in the process we found something else. Something I had suspected but never confirmed. I dug through the old zoning maps I had saved. The estate wasn't just historic. It sat on a wetland. A specific type of wetland that was protected by state law. My grandfather had told me about it years ago, but it had never been officially surveyed. If we could prove the wetland extended under the proposed building site, the resort couldn't be built. Not legally. The land value would plummet. The $8.5 million price tag was based on the potential for a luxury hotel. Without that potential, it was just a nice house in the woods, worth maybe $2 million. That was our lever. The forged signature was the hammer. The wetland was the anvil. We waited until the closing meeting. Juliet found out the time and place from a contact at the title company. It was scheduled for Friday afternoon at the developer's office. A final sign-off on some zoning variances. Nora would be there. Silas would be there. The developers would be there. I put on my best suit. I rolled up my blueprints. Juliet called the sheriff's department and asked for an escort to serve legal papers. We walked into that conference room like we owned it. The receptionist tried to stop us, but the deputy behind us was a very effective pass. We opened the double doors. Nora was laughing at something one of the suits said. Silas was leaning back in his chair looking smug. When they saw me, the laughter died instantly. Silas sat up so fast he almost tipped his chair over. Sadie, he stammered. What are you doing here? I didn't answer him. I walked to the head of the table and unrolled the blueprints. I slammed them down on the polished wood. The sale is void, I announced. And everyone in this room is about to have a very bad day. Nora stood up. You can't be here. Security. Sit down, Nora, I said. The deputy stepped forward. Nobody moved. The lead developer, a man in a gray suit, looked from me to Silas. What is going on? He demanded. This is the other owner, Silas said, his voice tight. But she signed a power of attorney. Everything is legal. Is it? I asked. I pulled the travel records from my bag. My passport stamps. My flight itinerary. My hotel receipts from Kyoto. This power of attorney is dated the 14th. I was in Tokyo on the 14th. Unless I learned to teleport, I couldn't have signed this. Which means it's a forgery. And since you witnessed it, Silas, that makes you an accessory to fraud. The developer's face went red. He turned to Silas. Is this true? Silas opened his mouth but no sound came out. But that's not all, I continued. I pointed to the blueprints. Even if the sale was legal, which it isn't, you can't build your resort. This land is a protected Class 2 wetland. I have the survey right here. Any commercial development is strictly prohibited. You paid $8.5 million for a nature preserve. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Then the developer stood up. He looked at Silas. You told me the zoning was clear. You told me the sister was on board. You lied to me. He turned to his lawyer. Cancel the wire. Void the contract. I want my money back. And I want him sued for misrepresentation. Silas looked like he was going to be sick. But Nora didn't look scared. She looked confused. Wait, she said. What do you mean cancel the wire? The money is already in the account. I spent some of it. I paid off my credit cards. I put a deposit on a condo. You can't just take it back. It's mine.
What yet her Ravel. It was fascinating and horrifying. She genuinely didn't understand. She didn't see the house as a legacy. She didn't see the crime. She just saw the money. It was the delusion of the empty wallet. She had been so desperate for that cash, so intent to it, that her brain had simply refused to process the consequences of how she got it. She had dissociated from the reality of the felony became the relief of the payoff was too intoxicant. She looked at me with full hatred. You ruined it, she screamed. You always ruin everything. You selfish bitch. Ines had money. The we stepped in. Ma'am, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. She looked across the table. The we caught her arm. He sung her a room and cuffed her. Nora screamed. It was a raw, ugly shout. Phila had his head in his hands. The developer we already backing up the brief, distancing themselves from the disaster. He stood here, watching me sister get arrested, watching me at boyfriend's career in lock, and he felt nothing but a cold, heavy finality. The fallout was swift. The shell was void. Phila lost his real estate license and was facing fraud charge. Nora was in this state on multiple counts of forgery and grand larceny. My parents tried to intervene. They came to my apartment 2 days later. My mother was screaming. My father looked grim. She said your sister, my mother please. You can't let her go to prison. Drop the charge, Sadie. Telly. For the family. I looked at them. I thought about the excavator. I thought about the silencer in the locker. I thought about the forger signature. No, I said. I didn't press the charge. The state did. Because she commit a crime. And you helped her. Be saying nothing, you helped her. If you want to help her now, hire her a lawyer. But don't ask me to say her. I'm done saving this family. I dropped back to the locker a week later. The machine was gone. The delivery was quick. I went up to the front door. I had a locksmith with me. He changed the lock on the front door, the back door, and the garage. I stood on the deck, looking up at the lake. The smell like pine and rain again. The dear rain from we gone. I breathed in deep. I felt a profound sense of peace. But it was a lonely peace. I really thanked that saving the estate meant losing the family. And I was okay with that. It was a necessary severance. In garden, we call it pruning. So my team, a branch get reset. It start to rot. And if you leave it, the rot strip. It infect the trunk. It kill the root. You have to cut it off. You have to make a clean, sharp cut, right at the cola. It leaves a wow. It leaves a scar. But it says the tree. It was the garden of me outline now. And I had just made the baguette cup of on. I looked at the new kiss in me hand. They we heavy. They we come. They we mine. I was just locking them all up. I was locking myself in. Into a life with me work once up for negotiation. With me legacy was say. We were free. If you ever had to be in so many story just to say your sanity, share this video.